Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm and we have quite a bit to cover today. We're going to talk about Bootstrap for grids and the grid system and how it works. So essentially, every page in Bootstrap is made up of the grid system, and it's essentially just a flex box system that will allow up to 12 columns across a page, and these columns will collapse horizontally. So think of them as like going horizontal across the page, but as the page size shrinks, meaning the screen that we're reading it on, the screen size shrinks, it will take those horizontal links and it will collapse them on top of each other vertically, which is really amazing for responsive design and mobile development. So we can use all 12 columns individually, like this top example, or we can span specific columns to create columns of varying widths. But it's only up to 12 columns. We have a maximum of 12 columns. So you can use these 12 columns in any configuration you'd like. So here we're spanning 6 columns, here we're spanning another 6, here we're spanning the whole thing to create a whole page. Now, the grid system is responsive, which means that the columns will rearrange themselves automatically depending on your screen size. It has to be 12 or fewer. And it's not required that you use all 12 available columns either. You don't have to use all 12 columns. So the Bootstrap 4 grid system has 5 separate classes that we can access to create columns based on how we want them to behave. For example, with the .col class, these are extra small devices with a screen width of less than 576 pixels. Col small is less than 576, equal to or greater than 576. Col mid is equal to or greater than 678. Col large is for 992, and the XL is for 1200 pixels. And they can be combined to make even more dynamic and flexible layouts. So we're going to talk about how these are going to be used. So here's essentially how the grid works, right? You're going to designate a class as or a div with the class of row. The row is going to be a horizontal row of columns, right? And inside you're going to have divs that are designated with the class of column, whatever size column you want to use. And then whatever content's inside of those div is essentially the content that goes inside of that container in that grid space. So we'll have multiple divs within or multiple columns within a row. And then when we designate a new row, that creates another row with content inside. Or you can just let Bootstrap automatically handle the layout by just using the col keyword. You don't have to actually designate these up here if you don't want to. So let's see. So for example, create a row, div class equals row, and then the desired number of columns, tags with the appropriate col. So for example, so up here with these col, right, with these asterisks, the first asterisk is whether it's small, medium, large, or XL, and the second star represents a number which should add up to 12. So up here, for this first row, we can have like large, so col large, and then this can be 9. And then this could be col large, and this could be 3, so that they add up. So the 9 will take up most of the space on the page, and then the 3 will take up a little bit of space over here. They have to add up to 12. In the second example, the one down here, instead of adding a number to each col, we just create cols, and then they make them 33. Sorry. Getting a phone call. Let me turn that off. I apologize. So the col would be 33.3% of the width of the whole total thing, because we're allowing it. We're just saying, hey, just separate it evenly. If we did 4 columns, then they would be 25% of the width. 2 would be 50%. You get the idea, right? I'm just going to turn my ringtone down here just in case I get another call. So here's some examples. So this is 3 equal columns. That's the example up here. 3 equal columns. So responsive columns, let's take a look at how this works. So I'm going to break this out a little bit so it's easier to see. Oh. So right here we can see that they're all stacked horizontally. But as I shrink the page, at some point, notice that they've all popped into to fitting horizontally, or vertically, sorry, because the screen became less than 576 pixels wide. Now as I go above it, they come back, go below it, they come back. So that is why we use this, why we use the grid feature, is because if we're using it on a phone, we want the information still to be organized properly, but we want it to look nice as well. So let's take a look at what two unequal responsive columns would look like. Oh. So we have the small column of 4 and a small column of 8 over here. Let's see what happens when we shrink these down. Oh, still going. Okay, so now it took a little while longer, but now they both are essentially the same length. Once we shrink them down, they both essentially become the same length. Cool. So don't be afraid to create columns of varying widths, as long as the total widths of all of your columns in a row make up to 12. All right, this is all stuff I just cut. I don't know why they put multiple stuff in here. Just talked about that. We can call more classes in here, like we can add a background, so background success would make this green, background warning will make this yellow. We can call in other classes in the same place. We can auto size our columns just by adding in the total amount of columns we want, and then it'll just make it an even amount. Again, we've already talked about that. This is a deeper dive on the extra small class, a deeper dive on the small, a deeper dive on medium, large, and extra large. And then there's some more examples in the grid examples page that we can play around with. Again, all this stuff is really, really easy to use. You just got to use it. All right, let's talk very quickly about the Jumbotron class. The Jumbotron will essentially format a big box on your page. And allow your text to look really big and menacing. So here's what most people use Jumbotrons for. Mostly you'd use a Jumbotron at the top of your page as your header. And that's exactly how we're going to use this in the assignment that we do today. So all you have to do is just designate a class as a Jumbotron, or designate the div with the class Jumbotron, and it becomes a Jumbotron. You can use a Jumbotron fluid to create a Jumbotron that goes along to the edges of the container. One thing I forgot to mention about class, or about grids, every grid, all of your grid stuff has to exist within a container. That's really important to understand. Everything in your Bootstrap web page has to exist inside of a container. So make sure you put everything inside of containers. Jumbotrons are cool. Tables. So adding the table class to a div, let me show you. So we're going to add a table class. That's a container, basic table. So we're going to add the class table to a table element, and it's going to format it so that it looks a lot nicer, a lot better. But there are better looking tables. For example, I like the table striped, which will give us striped. It's a table, but it's table striped. So every other row in the table is going to be striped or a little bit darker, so it's easier to see. You can also add borders to it. We can do a hover, where if you hover over the elements, it's going to add a nice effect there, which is kind of cool. We have the dark table, which is cool. Dark striped table, hoverable dark table. Now, the thing about a hoverable table is people are going to see that and they're going to think, ooh, I can click on that and it'll do something. So just know that people are going to think that if you have hoverable tables. We can do borderless. We can add some contexts to the table rows and table data. And these are some contexts that we can add, classes we can call to add context to our table rows if we want. We can change the table head to a dark theme and then a light theme. There's all kinds of stuff we can do. We can make tables smaller. We can make them much more responsive so that they, anyway, there's a lot we can do with tables. Images. Images are great because with images we can actually add some rounded corners or circles or a thumbnail view to images by throwing in some classes from Bootstrap that look really, really great. So we have rounded corners, circle, thumbnail view. We can use float right and float left to align our images to the page. So what you could do is have your first picture on the page float left, and then have a centered picture, and then float right. Responsive images, these are great. Okay, cool. So there's a bunch of information there. I'm not going to bore you too much by going over this stuff. You can look it up on your own. But in this project this week, we are going to be using the grid. We're going to be using a table. We're going to be using a Jumbotron, and we're going to be adding images. So there's a lot that we're going to be doing with this project. So I just wanted you to at least see where that information comes from. All right, that's it for me. Enjoy, and I will see you in the assignment. Peace.